Tonight, a West Michigan family shining a light on a culture of bias that they say that they've experienced in the Forest Hills area. They say that their kids have been treated differently because of the color of their skin.
News 8's Whitney Burney shares their story and how they hope to inspire change.
Well, Brian and Sue, the Michener family reached out to me last fall asking me to look into a number of incidents. They say their goal in sharing their story tonight is not to shame anyone, but to shed light on what it's like to live in an area where very few people look like you.
Here we go.
From the front yard to the schoolyard. It's Landon Michener's duty to protect his children.
I got 4.
But as a father, he's dealing with something beyond his control, something he can't shield his children from.
When you live out in the Forest Hills area, you don't have to see black people. And there's very few of us that live out here, and so you can literally grow up and not have to see black people. And until you're in school,
it's a difference Landon Michener says has resulted in incident.
I've been jogging down the street and had a car swerve at me to run me off the road.
After incident over the years.
When we first moved out here, we saw the police a lot. We just didn't realize the police was circling to see us. I actually went outside and caught them in the driveway running my license plate.
But what Michener says is most alarming is what has happened in their kids' classrooms. 2 years ago, his oldest son, George, was a sophomore at Forest Hills Central. Michener says George was slapped in the face by a white student. The Micheners don't believe the slap itself was racially charged, but say the school's response was disproportionate. In a police report, the slap was referred to as, quote, play fighting by a witness. The witness said George, quote, overreacted and pushed the student back, which he denied. The police report shows the normal punishment for something like this would warrant a 5-day suspension. However, it was suggested the student who slapped George only get detention. Meanwhile,
the school officer that's stationed at the school, he suggested that George gets a misdemeanor from that, and he was the one that got slapped.
Ultimately, George was not charged.
Come on.
Last year, Michener's daughter, Raylan, says she was told by another student they didn't want to work with her because of the color of her skin.
It's tiring, and it's like defeating to actually have these conversations repeatedly.
Experiences this family believes points to a culture of racism.
If we move, nobody learns from this lesson. I teach my kids to pack it up and run.
The Micheners, who say they don't believe the district did enough to respond to these incidents, have now opened a case with the Department of Civil Rights. The department says in the last 2 years, students and faculty filed a total of 4 discrimination complaints against Forest Hills Public Schools. A total of 104 complaints were filed against 66 school districts across the state in that same time period. The Civil Rights Department says there are only 5 districts in the state with 4 or more civil rights complaints. Forest Hills has the most of any West Michigan school district. Is it possible that there is a culture that perpetuates or allows for something like this to happen?
Racism is our country's original sin, and it continues to manifest itself in ways that are destructive to community.
While Superintendent Dan Beam says he cannot comment directly on incidents involving specific students, he says he knows that kids and staff can come to school with their own preconceived notions, a reality that prompted him to begin work to combat bias in Forest Hills schools more than a decade ago.
We need every single child. We need every single person in this world to be able to live into their full potential. We know there's a lot of brokenness in our world, and we feel like as a school system, we can be a source of solution for the brokenness.
The almost 80% white district now has teachers go through diversity training, and every semester the district offers institutes for healing racism for students, parents, and staff. High school students have the choice of adding a Global Learners Initiative course that focuses on other cultures and anti-racism.
Civil rights movement.
The district also added the Global Learners Library at Forest Hills Northern. It's filled with writers from marginalized focus groups, and historical literature. But are those resources producing real change?
My experience in Forest Hills would not be unique to any other African-American student in a predominantly white area.
Evan Terrence Lachey, a Forest Hills grad, now runs some of the district's anti-racism programs.
I think what's different about Forest Hills opposed to other places is that while there may be a cultural bias, which is reflective of what, in all honesty, what our nation is, there is an intentional effort and intentional work to combat that. So
it's work like Lachey's that the district says they'll continue supporting until it's no longer needed.
We're not perfect, but we are committed to growth.
I got you. Come here.
And work the Mitchners say they hope can protect their own children and their future classmates.
You can see it on the news or read about it, but this is like everyday life that Black people are faced to have to deal with. And it's not something that we can walk away from. It's our truth.
The Mitchner family says they have continued to face microaggressions, and they're now considering pulling their students from the district altogether. The case that they have open at the Civil Rights Department remains under investigation. Brian and Sue.
Sorry to hear that they are thinking about pulling the kids out of school, because it was encouraging to hear Mr. Mitchner say that they didn't want to move, that they weren't going to be intimidated by this or leave and run away.
I think they've just kind of reached a breaking point.
All right. Whitney, Bernie, thank you.
Thank you, Whitney.